The marble needs more attention in the East Wing hallway. Blessing Emeka kept her eyes on the clipboard, her pen moving steadily across the checklist as Kang Junhyuk stood 3 feet behind her, close enough that she could sense the weight of his presence without turning around. She had learned in the first week not to acknowledge these moments when he appeared without announcement, drifting through his own mansion like a restless ghost looking for something he couldn't name. "Did you hear me, Ms. Emeka?" "Yes, Mr. Kang. I'll have it addressed this afternoon." She turned then, meeting his gaze with the same professional calm she'd perfected over 5 years of domestic work in Seoul. His face gave away nothing, as usual, sharp features held in that expression of controlled distance that seemed permanently etched into the faces of men like him. But his eyes stayed on her a beat too long, and she recognized that look now. It had started appearing 2 months into her employment, subtle at first, then increasingly difficult to ignore. "You're very efficient," he said. "That's what you pay me for." "Is it?" Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor. "I'm beginning to wonder what exactly I'm paying for." Blessing tucked the clipboard under her arm. "A well-maintained home, Mr. Kang. As outlined in my contract." He moved closer, and she held her ground even as her pulse quickened. This was becoming a pattern, these verbal dances in empty hallways, his attempts to transform their employer-employee dynamic into something else, something she absolutely could not allow. "Have dinner with me tonight," he said. Not a question. Men like Kang Junhyuk didn't ask questions when they wanted something. That wouldn't be appropriate. "Why not?" "Because you're my employer." "I could change that." He said it so easily, as if dissolving professional boundaries was as simple as signing a check. "I could terminate your contract right now. Then you'd just be a woman I'm interested in taking to dinner." Blessing felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the same suffocating sensation she'd experienced in other households where men mistook her professionalism for invitation, her beauty for availability. She had left 2 positions before this one for the same reason. She couldn't afford to lose this job, the pay was exceptional, and she'd been sending money home to Lagos for her mother's medical treatments. But she also couldn't afford to become another conquest for a man who confused desire with possession. "Then you'd just be a man who fired his maid for refusing to have dinner with him," she replied. "I don't think that's the reputation you want, Mr. Kang." His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he might actually do it, fire her on the spot, let his wounded pride make the decision. But instead, he stepped back, his face resetting into that mask of cool detachment. "You're right," he said quietly. "That was inappropriate. It won't happen again." He walked away, and Blessing released the breath she'd been holding. She knew he was lying. It would happen again. It always did. The mansion felt bigger in the evenings, when the cleaning staff had left and only Blessing remained to finish the final tasks of the day. She preferred these quiet hours, when she could move through the vast rooms without the weight of Junhyuk's attention following her. Tonight she worked in the library, dusting the rows of books he probably never read, arranged more for aesthetic than actual use. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Marcus. "Finishing round soon. Still on for tomorrow?" She smiled despite her exhaustion. Marcus Whitmore was everything stable in her life right now, a Scottish-born medical doctor working at Samsung Medical Center, kind and steady and utterly uncomplicated. They'd been dating for 8 months, and while she wouldn't call it passionate, it was comfortable. Safe. He didn't look at her the way Junhyuk did, with that unsettling intensity that felt less like attraction and more like hunger. "Yes. 7 p.m.? Perfect. Miss you." She pocketed the phone and continued working, letting the familiar routine settle her nerves. But she couldn't shake the memory of Junhyuk's face when she'd rejected him, that flash of something raw beneath his controlled exterior. She'd seen powerful men want things before, but this felt different. More personal. More dangerous. "You're still here." Blessing spun around. Junhyuk stood in the doorway, no longer in his usual tailored suit but wearing dark slacks and a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked younger this way. More human. "I'm finishing the library," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "It's past 9. I'm aware." He entered the room, and she fought the urge to step back. There was something different about him tonight, a looseness in his movements, a heaviness in the way he looked at her. She caught the faint scent of whiskey as he moved closer. "Have you been drinking, Mr. Kong? Does that bother you? It's not my place to be bothered or not bothered. Stop." His voice was sharper now. "Stop doing that." "Doing what?" "Being so perfectly professional. So perfectly distant." He was close enough now that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the dark circles that spoke of sleepless nights. "Don't you ever just let yourself be human?" "I am human," she said quietly. "I'm also your employee. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. I don't want you to be my employee." "Then what do you want me to be?" The question hung between them, dangerous and electric. Jun Hyuk looked at her with an expression that made something twist in her stomach, not quite desire, not quite fear, but something suspended between recognition and resistance. "I want you to have dinner with me," he said finally. "Not as my employee. Not as anything professional. Just as yourself." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I'm seeing someone." The words landed like a physical blow. She watched something crumble in his face, quickly hidden, but not quickly enough. He took a step back, then another, putting necessary distance between them. "I see." His voice was carefully neutral now. "The doctor." Blessing's heart stuttered. "How do you know about Marcus?" "You mentioned him once." To Mrs. Kim. The housekeeper, who clearly couldn't keep private conversations private. A medical professional. Very respectable. There was something bitter in the way he said respectable, as if the word itself was an indictment. Blessing set down her duster, meeting his eyes directly. "Mr. Kong, I need this job. I need the income, and I need the stability. But I can't continue working here if you can't accept professional boundaries. I've left positions before for this exact reason, and I will leave this one too if necessary." "You'd choose him over me?" The question was so absurd, so divorced from reality, that Blessing almost laughed. "There is no choice to make. You're my employer. He's my boyfriend. Those are two completely different categories that don't overlap." "They could." "No, they couldn't. And even if they could, I wouldn't choose either option because I'm not a prize to be won. I'm a woman trying to make a living and maintain her dignity while doing it." She picked up her supplies, preparing to leave, but Jun Hyuk's voice stopped her. "I'm sorry." Blessing turned back. He looked genuinely stricken now, the whiskey and exhaustion combining to strip away his usual control. "I'm not good at this," he continued. "At wanting something I can't have. At feeling something I don't understand. I've spent my entire life in control of every situation, every outcome. And then you walked into my home, and suddenly nothing makes sense anymore." Despite herself, despite every instinct telling her to maintain distance, Blessing felt a flicker of sympathy. She recognized the loneliness in his voice, the isolation that came from living in a gilded cage of your own making. "Mr. Kong, I can't be the solution to your loneliness. That's not fair to either of us." "I know." He rubbed his face, suddenly looking his age. "I know that. I just don't know how to stop wanting it anyway." Blessing left him standing in the library, surrounded by books he didn't read in a house that felt more like a museum than a home. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave for the night, she felt the uncomfortable weight of his confession following her. She understood what it meant to be lonely in a foreign country, to feel like you were always performing a version of yourself that others could accept. But she also understood that loneliness couldn't be someone else's responsibility to fix. The next evening, Marcus took her to a quiet Italian restaurant in Gangnam, the kind of place with soft lighting and discreet service that made her feel momentarily removed from her daily life. He talked about his day, a difficult surgery, a promising new treatment protocol, the politics of hospital administration, and she listened with half her attention, nodding at the appropriate moments while her mind kept drifting back to the library, to Jun Hyuk's face when she'd told him about Marcus. "You're distracted tonight," Marcus observed, reaching across the table to touch her hand. His fingers were cool, steady, the hands of someone who made incisions with perfect precision. "Everything all right?" "Just tired. Long day." "You work too hard." It was a familiar refrain. Marcus had been suggesting for months that she quit her job, let him support her while she figured out what she really wanted to do. The offer was generous, but it made her uncomfortable in ways she couldn't fully articulate. She'd been supporting herself since she was 18, sending money home to family, building her own financial independence. The idea of becoming dependent on a man, even a kind one, felt like losing something essential. "I like working," she said simply. "I know you do. I just wish you didn't have to work so hard at something that clearly drains you." He meant well. Marcus always meant well. But there was a blindness in his kindness, a failure to understand that work wasn't just about money for her. It was about dignity, about proving to herself and everyone else that she could thrive in a country that often treated her as either invisible or exotic, never quite fully human. "How's your mother?" Marcus asked, shifting topics with the smooth ease of someone trained in bedside manner. "Better. The new medication is helping." "That's good. I'm glad the money's making a difference." There it was, the subtle reminder that she needed the income, that leaving her job wasn't really an option no matter how much he might wish otherwise. Blessing squeezed his hand, feeling guilty for her wandering attention, for the way her thoughts kept circling back to her employer instead of focusing on the man sitting across from her. They finished dinner and Marcus drove her home to her small apartment in Itaewon, the international district where she felt slightly less conspicuous among the diverse crowd of foreigners and locals. He kissed her goodnight at her door, gentle and chaste, and she felt the familiar absence of electricity, that spark that was supposed to exist between two people in love. But maybe spark was overrated. Maybe what mattered was kindness and stability and someone who didn't look at you like you were a puzzle they needed to solve or a prize they needed to win. Inside her apartment, Blessing changed into comfortable clothes and made herself tea, settling onto her small couch with her laptop to review her schedule for the next day. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "I meant what I said. I'm sorry. I'll do better. KJH." She stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. Professional boundaries required professional distance, and responding would only encourage more contact, more attempts to transform their dynamic into something it couldn't be. But as she lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, she kept seeing his face in the library, that raw vulnerability, that admission of confusion and want. She understood it because she'd felt it herself in those early months in Seoul, when everything was strange and overwhelming, and she didn't know how to be both herself and the version of herself that others seemed to need. The difference was that she'd learned to live with that dissonance. She'd learned to exist in the spaces between cultures, to be simultaneously visible and invisible, to protect herself by maintaining careful boundaries. Junhyuk hadn't learned any of that. He'd built walls instead, surrounded himself with luxury and control, convinced himself that power was the same as connection. Blessing turned over, pulling her blanket tighter. Tomorrow she would go back to work, back to maintaining professional distance, back to pretending she hadn't seen the loneliness in his eyes. It was the only way to survive in a house that beautiful and that empty. 3 weeks passed in careful détente. Junhyuk maintained distance, spoke to her only about household matters, and stopped appearing in rooms she was cleaning. Blessing told herself this was what she wanted, professional boundaries restored, the uncomfortable tension dissipated. But the mansion felt different now. Heavier. She caught glimpses of Junhyuk through windows, sitting alone in his home office late into the night, or standing on the terrace smoking cigarettes he didn't seem to actually enjoy. Mrs. Kim mentioned that he'd been working longer hours, eating less, speaking even less than usual. "He's always been solitary," the older woman said in Korean, shaking her head with maternal concern. "But lately it's like he's disappearing into himself." Blessing said nothing, focusing on polishing the already spotless silverware. It wasn't her responsibility to worry about Junhyuk's emotional state. She had her own life, her own concerns. Marcus had started talking more seriously about their future, nothing as concrete as proposals, but gentle suggestions about moving in together, about her meeting his parents when they visited from Edinburgh next month. She should have been happy about this progression, this natural movement toward commitment. Instead, she felt a growing sense of unease, as if she were being asked to step into a role she wasn't sure fit. On a Thursday afternoon, while Blessing was reorganizing the kitchen pantry, she heard raised voices from Junhyuk's office. She paused, not wanting to eavesdrop but unable to avoid hearing his voice carrying through the open door. "I don't care about the timeline." "I said no." A pause, then sharper, "I said no. Tell the board I'm not interested in the merger." More silence, then the sound of something heavy hitting the desk. "Because I'm not in the right frame of mind to make decisions that affect thousands of employees. That's why." Blessing moved quietly past the office, not wanting to be caught listening. But as she passed, she caught a glimpse of Junhyuk through the doorway, standing with his back to her, one hand pressed against the window, his entire body radiating tension. For a moment, she considered checking on him. But that would be crossing a line, transforming her role from employee to something more personal. So she continued to the pantry, ignoring the uncomfortable pull of concern. That evening, as she was preparing to leave, Junhyuk appeared in the foyer. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened and jacket discarded, dark shadows under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "Ms. Emeka." She paused, hand on the door. "Yes, Mr. Kong? Are you happy?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm sorry." "With him." "The doctor." "Are you happy?" Blessing considered lying, offering the easy answer that would end this conversation quickly. But something in his face, that genuine curiosity mixed with something sadder, made her pause. "I'm content," she said carefully. "That's not the same thing. Maybe contentment is better than happiness. Happiness is temporary. Contentment is sustainable." Junhyuk studied her for a long moment, and she had the unsettling sensation of being truly seen, all her carefully maintained composure stripped away. "That's a very sad philosophy," he said quietly. "It's a practical one. Is that what you want? A practical life with a practical man who makes you practically content?" The question felt like an accusation, and Blessing felt her defenses rising. "What I want is none of your concern, Mr. Kong." "You're right." He moved closer, and she caught that scent again, whiskey, subtle but present. "But I'm going to tell you what I want anyway. I want to take you away from all of this. I want to show you that you deserve more than contentment. I want to give you everything." "Mr. Kong." "I know. Professional boundaries. I'm your employer. You're seeing someone. I've heard it all." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. "But none of that changes how I feel. And I'm tired of pretending it does." Blessing's heart was racing now, her professional composure cracking under the weight of his intensity. "You don't even know me. You don't know anything about me beyond what you see in your house. Then let me know you. Have dinner with me. Just once. Let me understand why I can't get you out of my head." "No." The word was quiet but firm, and she watched something break in his expression. He stepped back, nodding slowly. "Right. Of course." That was inappropriate again. He laughed, a hollow sound. "I keep apologizing and then doing the exact same thing. That's the definition of insanity, isn't it? Mr. Kong, I think you need to talk to someone. A professional. Someone who can help you work through whatever you're going through." "What I'm going through?" His voice had an edge now. "I'm going through the unique torture of wanting someone who won't even acknowledge that I exist as anything other than a signature on a paycheck. That's not fair. None of this is fair." The sudden volume startled them both. Junhyuk closed his eyes, visibly trying to regain control. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter but no less intense. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for putting you in this position. I'm sorry for being unprofessional. I'm sorry for wanting something I can't have. But I'm not sorry for feeling it." Blessing felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes, frustration and sympathy and exhaustion all mixing together. "I need to go." "Of course." He stepped aside, giving her clear access to the door. "Good night, Ms. Emeka." She left without responding, her hands shaking as she walked to the bus stop. The evening air was cool against her flushed face, and she stood waiting for her bus while trying to process what had just happened. Junhyuk wasn't just attracted to her. He was obsessed. And obsession, she knew from experience, was dangerous in ways that simple attraction wasn't. Obsession didn't respect boundaries. It didn't accept rejection. It consumed everything in its path. She needed to quit. She needed to find another position, put distance between herself and whatever was unfolding in that mansion. But the thought of starting over, of explaining to Marcus why she'd left such a well-paying job, of potentially losing the financial stability that kept her mother in treatment, all of it felt overwhelming. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus, how was your day?" She stared at the message, then typed back, "Fine. Yours?" "Good. Saved a life. Want to celebrate tomorrow?" "Sure." The bus arrived and she climbed on, finding a seat near the back. Through the window, she watched Seoul pass by neon signs and crowded streets, the beautiful chaos of a city that had never quite felt like home, but had become familiar enough to navigate. She'd built a life here through sheer determination, and she wouldn't let anyone, not an obsessed employer, not a well-meaning boyfriend, dictate what that life should look like. But as the bus carried her away from Gangnam, away from that massive empty mansion, she couldn't shake the image of Jun-hyuk standing in the foyer, looking at her with eyes that held too much want and too much pain. She told herself it wasn't her problem. She told herself she'd done the right thing. She told herself a lot of things that felt increasingly like lies. The next morning, Blessing arrived at the mansion to find Mrs. Kim waiting with worried eyes and rapid Korean. "Slowly, please," Blessing said, her own Korean still imperfect after 5 years. Mrs. Kim switched to heavily accented English. "Mr. Kang not come from office last night. Still there this morning. Not answering phone." Blessing felt an unwelcome spike of concern. Maybe he's just busy. No. Something wrong. Mrs. Kim struggled for the word. Changed. Since weeks. Not eating. Not sleeping. Yesterday he fired 3 people for small mistake. "That's not really my concern, Mrs. Kim." But the older woman's expression suggested otherwise. There was something knowing in her eyes, a maternal understanding that saw more than Blessing wanted visible. "You help him," Mrs. Kim said. "It wasn't a question. I'm his housekeeper, not his therapist. You're reason he is sick." The words landed like an accusation, and Blessing felt her defenses rising. "That's not fair. I haven't done anything except maintain professional boundaries." Mrs. Kim patted her hand with surprising gentleness. "Sometimes doing nothing is still doing something. You see him. Really see him. That is dangerous for man who spend whole life invisible." Before Blessing could respond, her phone rang. Jun-hyuk's office manager, speaking rapid Korean that she only partially understood, but the urgency in his voice was clear. Something about a canceled meeting, uncharacteristic behavior, concern from the executive team. "I'm just the housekeeper," Blessing told him. "I can't help with company matters." But even as she said it, she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Mrs. Kim was right, something had shifted in Jun-hyuk, and whether she wanted to acknowledge it or not, she was connected to that shift. She spent the day working with unusual distraction, checking her phone repeatedly for messages that didn't come. By evening, when Jun-hyuk still hadn't returned to the mansion, Blessing found herself standing in his home office, staring at the family photographs on his desk, images of a younger Jun-hyuk with severe-looking parents, formal portraits that held no warmth. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus, dinner tonight? I have something I want to discuss." Something in the phrasing made her stomach tighten. She knew what that tone meant, the careful prelude to a serious conversation. She wasn't ready for serious. She wasn't ready for any of this. "Can we do tomorrow instead? Long day." "Sure. Everything okay?" "Fine. Just tired." She left the office and continued her work, trying to ignore the growing unease in her chest. When she finally left the mansion that evening, she saw Jun-hyuk's Lamborghini pulling into the driveway, the engine's roar cutting through the quiet neighborhood. She should have kept walking. Should have gotten on her bus and left him to whatever demons he was wrestling with. But something about the way he got out of the car, movements too loose, too unsteady, made her pause. "Mr. Kong?" He turned, and even in the dim light she could see that he was drunk. Not slightly buzzed, but genuinely intoxicated, his eyes unfocused and his balance uncertain. "Ms. Emeka." He said her name carefully, as if each syllable required concentration. You're still here. Or here again. I can't remember which. You've been drinking. Very observant. He leaned against his car, expensive Italian machinery that probably cost more than she'd earn in 5 years. I've been doing lots of things. Drinking. Thinking. Thinking about drinking. It's been a very productive day. You shouldn't drive like this. Probably not. But I did anyway. Made it home alive, so I suppose that's a victory. Blessing moved closer, professional concern overriding her desire to maintain distance. Where's your driver? Gave him the week off. Wanted to be alone. He laughed, that same hollow sound from before. I'm very good at being alone. Had years of practice. You need to go inside. Sleep it off. Sleep. He repeated the word like it was foreign. Yes, I should do that. Except every time I close my eyes, I see you. Standing in my library. In my kitchen. In every room of this ridiculous house. How do you sleep when someone haunts you even with your eyes closed? Mr. Kang, you're drunk and you're not thinking clearly. I'm drunk, yes. But I'm thinking very clearly. Maybe for the first time in months. He pushed off from the car, taking a step toward her. Do you know what I realized today? During my 5th whiskey, or maybe it was the 6th. I realized that I've spent my entire life building this empire, accumulating wealth and power and influence, and none of it means anything. None of it touches the loneliness. That's the alcohol talking. No. The alcohol just gave me permission to say it out loud. He was close enough now that she could smell the whiskey on his breath, see the genuine anguish in his eyes. I've tried everything. I offered you money, status, everything I thought mattered. But you don't want any of it. You want nothing from me. That's not true. What do you want then? Tell me. I'll give it to you. I want you to respect my boundaries. I want you to accept that I'm with someone else. I want you to let me do my job without this constant weight of your expectations. He flinched as if she'd struck him. So you want me to disappear? To pretend I don't feel what I feel? I want you to move on. I can't. The admission was quiet, broken. I've tried. I've thrown myself into work. I've avoided you. I've done everything I can think of to make these feelings go away. But they just get stronger. You get stronger. Until I can't think about anything else. Blessing felt tears threatening again, frustration and sympathy warring inside her. This isn't healthy. This isn't love. This is obsession. Maybe they're the same thing. They're not. How do you know? He reached out as if to touch her face, then seemed to remember himself and let his hand drop. Have you ever felt something so consuming that it rewrites everything you thought you knew about yourself? The question hit too close to something Blessing had been trying not to examine. Because the truth was, she did feel something when Junhyuk looked at her. Something uncomfortable and unwanted, but undeniably present. She felt seen in a way that Marcus's kind affection never quite achieved. But feeling seen wasn't the same as being loved, and being desired wasn't the same as being valued. Go inside, she said quietly. Sleep. We can pretend this conversation never happened. I don't want to pretend anymore. You don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. He swayed slightly, exhaustion and intoxication catching up with him. I'm choosing to tell you the truth. I'm in love with you. Desperately, pathetically in love with you. And I know it doesn't matter because you've chosen someone else, someone stable and respectable who can give you the contentment you think you want. But I needed to say it. Just once. Out loud. So you know. Blessing's heart was pounding, her professional composure completely shattered. You don't love me. You don't even know me. I know that you send money home to Lagos every month. I know that you stay late every Thursday to deep clean the library even though it's not in your contract because you love books and you can't stand to see them neglected. I know that you take your coffee with too much sugar and no milk. I know that you hum when you're concentrating and you always park yourself in front of windows when you're taking a break because you miss the sunlight. He took a shaky breath. I know that you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, and I don't just mean physically. You have this strength, this dignity that no one can touch. And I know that I'm not good enough for you. But I also know that I can't stop wanting to try. The specificity of his observations left Blessing speechless. She hadn't realized he'd been paying such close attention, cataloging these small details of her life like they mattered. It was invasive and touching and terrifying all at once. "You need to go inside," she said again, because it was the only thing she could think to say. "Will you help me?" "What?" "I don't think I can make it up the stairs alone." He gave her a rueful smile. "Apparently 6 whiskeys is my limit." Against her better judgment, Blessing found herself moving to his side, letting him lean on her as they made their way into the mansion. He was heavier than she expected, all solid muscle beneath the expensive clothes, and she felt the heat of him through her uniform as they navigated the grand foyer and climbed the sweeping staircase. His bedroom was on the 2nd floor, a massive space she usually cleaned but had never entered with him present. It felt intimate in a way that made her uncomfortable, crossing another invisible line she'd sworn to maintain. She helped him to the bed, intending to leave immediately. But as she tried to pull away, his hand closed around her wrist. "Don't go yet. I need to. 5 minutes. Please. Just sit with me for 5 minutes." Blessing knew she should refuse, should leave right now before the situation became even more complicated. But there was something so vulnerable in his voice, such naked pleading, that she found herself sinking onto the edge of the bed. 5 minutes, she said firmly. Jun-hyuk lay back against the pillows, still holding her wrist like a lifeline. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not hating me. For helping me just now. For being kind even when I don't deserve it. Everyone deserves basic kindness. You'd be surprised how rare it actually is." His eyes drifted closed. "My parents never loved each other. Their marriage was a business arrangement. They had me because it was expected, raised me to take over the company, and died in a car accident before I could disappoint them. I've spent my entire life maintaining the image they created, being the perfect CEO, the perfect heir. But I was never taught how to be a person, how to feel things, how to want things beyond profit margins and market share." Blessing listened, seeing him clearly for the first time not as her employer, but as someone trapped in his own cage of expectations and obligations. She understood that feeling, the weight of carrying other people's dreams and needs while your own got buried deeper and deeper. "You can learn," she said softly. "It's not too late. Teach me." His eyes opened, focusing on her with sudden intensity. "Teach me how to be human. That's not something you can teach. It's something you have to choose. Every day. In small moments. What if I choose you? What if you're the thing that makes me want to be better? That's too much pressure to put on another person. You have to want to be better for yourself first." His thumb traced small circles on the inside of her wrist, and Blessing felt her pulse jump in response. She should pull away. Should leave right now. But something kept her frozen, suspended in this moment that felt both dangerous and necessary. "Your 5 minutes are up," she said quietly. "I know." But he didn't release her wrist. Blessing. It was the first time he'd used her first name, and hearing it from his lips sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with temperature. "That's your name, isn't it?" "Blessing. It suits you. You're mine. I'm not yours or anyone's. I'm my own." "Yes." He smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. "That's what makes you so extraordinary." He released her wrist finally, and Blessing stood, smoothing her uniform even though it didn't need smoothing. "Sleep," she told him. "We're not going to talk about any of this tomorrow. This conversation never happened. If that's what you need to believe." She left quickly, her heart racing as she descended the stairs and gathered her things. Mrs. Kim was long gone, the mansion quiet except for the sound of her own footsteps on marble floors. Outside, the evening air did nothing to cool the heat in her face. She'd crossed a line tonight, had allowed intimacy that should never have existed between employer and employee. She'd seen him vulnerable, had held him, had listened to his confession with something more than professional courtesy. On the bus home, she stared at her reflection in the dark window and barely recognized herself. Her carefully constructed walls were cracking, and she didn't know how to repair them. Marcus called as she was unlocking her apartment door. "Hey you," he said, his accent familiar and comforting. "Just finished my shift. Wanted to hear your voice." "Hi." She felt guilty even saying the word, as if infidelity could exist in tone alone. You sure you're okay? You've seemed off lately. I'm fine. Just tired. You work too hard at that house. That man works you too hard. If only Marcus knew how true that statement was, though not in the way he meant. It's just the job. Well, tomorrow we'll talk about our future. I think you'll be happy with what I have to say. Blessing's stomach dropped. Marcus, I don't think. Don't worry, it's good news. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? Love you. He hung up before she could respond, and she was grateful for that because she didn't know what she would have said. Did she love Marcus? She cared about him, respected him, appreciated his stability. But was that love? Or was love something more consuming, more dangerous, more like the expression in Jun Hyuk's eyes when he looked at her with all that raw want and vulnerability? She slept poorly that night, dreams mixing with reality until she couldn't distinguish between them. In one dream, she was back in Jun Hyuk's bedroom, but this time when he reached for her wrist, she didn't pull away. In another, she was at dinner with Marcus, except his face kept shifting, features rearranging until she couldn't remember what he actually looked like. She woke feeling unrest and anxious, dreading the day ahead. But when she arrived at the mansion, Jun Hyuk was already gone, his office manager calling to say he wouldn't be home for several days. Business trip to Tokyo, unexpected but necessary. Blessing felt both relief and something uncomfortable that might have been disappointment. The mansion felt even emptier without his presence, rooms echoing with absence. That evening, she met Marcus at an upscale restaurant, the kind of place with white tablecloths and servers who moved like dancers. He'd dressed up, wearing a suit instead of his usual casual clothes, and there was a nervous energy about him that made Blessing's anxiety spike. "You look beautiful," he said as they were seated. "Thank you. You seem nervous." "I am a bit." He laughed, running a hand through his sandy hair. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about our future. We've been together 8 months now, and I think it's time to take the next step." "Marcus, let me finish. Please." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "I know this might seem fast, but I'm 36 years old. I've dated enough to know when something is right. And you're right, Blessing. You're brilliant and beautiful, and you make me want to be better. So I'm not proposing, not yet, but I am asking if you'll move in with me. I bought a flat in Gangnam. 3 bedrooms, beautiful view. There's plenty of space for you to have your own room if you want, no pressure. But I want to wake up with you. I want to build a life together." Blessing stared at him, his kind face and earnest expression, and felt nothing but a growing sense of panic. This was what she should want. A good man offering her stability, offering to build a life together. But all she could think about was Jun Hyuk's hand on her wrist, the way he'd said her name like it was sacred. "I can't," she heard herself say. Marcus's smile faltered. "You can't move in, or you can't build a life together?" "I don't know. I just know that right now I can't give you an answer." "Is this about your job?" "Because you can quit. I make enough for both of us." "It's not about money." "Then what is it about?" Blessing pulled her hand back, trying to organize thoughts that refused to be organized. "Marcus, you're wonderful. You've been nothing but kind and patient and supportive. But I don't think I'm in the same place you are. I care about you, but I'm not sure I love you the way you deserve to be loved." His face went pale. "Is there someone else?" "No." The lie came automatically, because technically it was true. There wasn't someone else in any real sense. Just an employer whose confession had destabilized everything she thought she knew about herself and what she wanted. Then what changed? "Because 3 weeks ago, you seemed happy. 3 weeks ago, I was content. But you were right before. Content isn't the same as happy. And I'm starting to realize that I don't even know what would make me happy." Marcus sat back, his expression shifting from hurt to frustration. "I'm offering you everything. A home, a future, security. What more do you need?" "I need time. I need to figure out what I actually want instead of just accepting what seems practical. This is about that job." Marcus's voice had an edge now. "That man. Your employer. Something happened." "Nothing happened. But something changed. I can see it in your face, Blessing. You're different. More distracted. More distant." He leaned forward, and there was genuine fear in his eyes now. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm being paranoid. Blessing wanted to reassure him, to lie convincingly enough that they could go back to the comfortable status quo. But she couldn't do it. Not when she was this confused, this uncertain about everything. I think we need to take a break, she said quietly. A break. He repeated the words like they were foreign. You mean you want to break up? I mean I need time and space to think. Without pressure. Without expectations. Marcus stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. 8 months. I've given you 8 months of my life, been patient while you kept me at arm's length, never pushing for more than you were willing to give. And now you need space. I'm sorry. You're sorry. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you know how many of my colleagues told me this wouldn't work? That you were too guarded, too independent, too focused on maintaining your own life. But I thought I could be patient enough, kind enough. I thought eventually you'd trust me enough to let me in. Marcus. No. I'm done being patient. I'm done waiting for you to decide if I'm worth your time. He pulled out his wallet, throwing cash on the table. Enjoy your space, Blessing. I hope it keeps you warm at night. He left, and Blessing sat alone at the table, feeling the weight of eyes on her as other diners tried not to stare. She'd just destroyed the most stable relationship she'd had in years, and for what? For the possibility of something with a man who was her employer, who was obsessed rather than in love, who represented everything complicated and impossible. She paid for her own meal and took a taxi home, too emotionally exhausted to deal with public transportation. In her apartment, she changed into comfortable clothes and sat on her couch, staring at her phone. No messages from Marcus. No messages from anyone. Just silence and the growing realization that she'd made a choice without fully understanding what she was choosing. 3 days later, Junhyuk returned from Tokyo looking worse than when he'd left. Blessing saw him only briefly as he passed through the foyer, his face gaunt and his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep or excess alcohol or both. He didn't acknowledge her presence, moving past like she was part of the furniture. Mrs. Kim clucked her tongue, shaking her head. Getting worse. Blessing focused on her work, telling herself it wasn't her concern. But throughout the day, she was acutely aware of his presence in the mansion, the sound of his footsteps overhead, the long silences punctuated by phone calls conducted in clipped, harsh Korean. She'd made her choice. She'd ended things with Marcus, but that didn't mean she was available for whatever destructive thing Junhyuk wanted to build between them. She was choosing herself, choosing independence over entanglement. At least, that's what she told herself. It was close to midnight when she heard the Lamborghini's engine roar to life. She was still in the mansion, having stayed late to finish quarterly deep cleaning, and the sound made her stomach drop. She ran to the window in time to see the red sports car tear out of the driveway, tires squealing against pavement. He was drunk again. She could tell by the way the car swerved slightly before straightening, by the aggressive speed that suggested recklessness rather than confidence. Blessing grabbed her phone, then hesitated. Who would she call? The police? That would only create scandal for him and potentially get her fired. His office manager? It wasn't her place to report on his personal behavior. She stood frozen with indecision for several long minutes, then forced herself to continue cleaning. He was a grown man. His choices were his own. She couldn't be responsible for every self-destructive decision he made. But an hour later, when her phone rang with an unknown number, she felt her blood go cold. Is this Blessing Emeka? A woman's voice, speaking Korean-accented English. Yes. This is Samsung Medical Center. We have a patient here, Kong Junhyuk. You're listed as his emergency contact. The room tilted. I'm what? Emergency contact. You're the only number in his phone besides business associates. He's been in an accident. He's stable, but you should come. Blessing's hands were shaking as she grabbed her bag and rushed out of the mansion. She took a taxi, too expensive, but faster than waiting for a bus, and spent the entire ride trying to process what the nurse had told her. He'd listed her as his emergency contact. Not family, not friends, not business partners. Her. The hospital was bright and sterile, everything white and chrome and smelling of disinfectant. A nurse led her to a private room on the third floor, and Blessing's heart was pounding so hard she thought she might be sick. Junhyuk was awake, propped up in bed with bandages on his head and left arm in a cast. His face was bruised, one eye swollen nearly shut, but he was conscious and looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "You came," he said quietly. "They said I was your emergency contact." "You are." "Why?" "Because you're the only person I wanted to call if something happened to me." Blessing sank into the chair beside his bed, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. "What happened?" "I crashed my car into a barrier on the expressway. Drunk driving. Stupid and reckless and entirely my fault." He tried to smile but winced at the pain. "The car's totaled. I'm mostly intact. Could have been worse. You could have died. Yes. You could have killed someone else." "I know." His voice was hollow. "I know all of that. I knew it while I was driving. But I couldn't stop myself. Haven't been able to stop myself from a lot of things lately." The admission hung between them, and Blessing felt something crack open inside her chest. He'd nearly died. This man who'd been nothing but professional distance 3 months ago, who'd become an obsession she couldn't shake, who'd somehow become important despite all her attempts to maintain boundaries. He'd nearly died because he was spiraling and she'd been too focused on protecting herself to see how bad things had gotten. "The doctor said you can't be alone for the next few weeks," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You have a concussion and a broken arm. You need someone to monitor you. I'll hire a nurse. You'll come home and I'll take care of you." Junhyuk's eye widened, the one that could still open fully. "What?" "You heard me. You're my employer and I'm responsible for the household, which currently includes your physical recovery. I'll stay at the mansion until you're stable." "Blessing, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I'm choosing to." She met his gaze directly, letting him see the resolve in her eyes. "But this doesn't change anything between us. I'm your employee. This is part of my job. Do you understand?" He studied her for a long moment, and she saw gratitude and frustration and something tender all mixing together in his expression. "I understand." "Good." The doctor released him 2 days later with strict instructions about rest, medication, and follow-up appointments. Blessing converted one of the guest rooms on the first floor into a recovery space, moving in a comfortable bed and setting up a schedule for medications and meals. Mrs. Kim was delighted by this arrangement, believing it meant something it absolutely did not. Blessing ignored her knowing looks and focused on the practical tasks, helping Junhyuk navigate the house with his injured arm, preparing meals that he would actually eat, monitoring his pain levels and sleep patterns. Being close to him like this was different than their previous interactions. More intimate, more domestic. She saw him in worn t-shirts and sweatpants instead of tailored suits. She watched him struggle with simple tasks like buttoning his shirt or opening medicine bottles, his frustration evident but his pride preventing him from asking for help. "Let me," she said on the third day, when she found him in the kitchen trying one-handed to open a jar of jam. "I can do it. I know you can. But I can do it faster." She took the jar from him, twisted the lid off with ease, and handed it back. "It's not weakness to accept help. Feels like weakness." "That's your pride talking." She began preparing his breakfast, moving around the kitchen with practiced efficiency. "You know what actually takes strength? Admitting when you need support. Letting people see you vulnerable. That's harder than any show of independence." Junhyuk leaned against the counter, watching her work. "Is that what you're doing? Seeing me vulnerable? That's what you've been showing me since I started working here. You just didn't realize it until recently. What else do you see?" Blessing paused in her movements, considering the question. "I see someone who was never taught that it's okay to feel things. Someone who built walls so high that he forgot there was a world outside them. Someone who's lonely but doesn't know how to let anyone close enough to change that. You see all that? It's not hard to see once you're looking." She plated his food, toast with jam, scrambled eggs, fresh fruit. "I see it because I recognize it. Because I've done the same thing in different ways." He sat at the small kitchen table, and she joined him with her own coffee. This had become their routine, breakfast together in the informal kitchen rather than the grand dining room, conversations that felt less like employer and employee and more like two people learning to be honest with each other. Tell me about Lagos, Junhyuk said. You send money home every month. Tell me about your family. Blessing hesitated, then decided there was no harm in sharing. My mother was a teacher. My father died when I was 12. After that, it was just her and me and my younger brother. She wanted us to have opportunities she never had, so she worked 3 jobs to send me to university. I studied international business, got a job in Dubai, then Seoul. I send money home for her medical treatments and to help my brother finish school. What's wrong with your mother? Diabetes. Heart complications. The medical system in Nigeria isn't always reliable, so I pay for private care. That's why you can't quit this job. That's part of why. She met his eyes over her coffee cup. But it's also pride. I've built my independence on my ability to earn my own way. The idea of depending on anyone, whether that's an employer's charity or a boyfriend's financial support, feels like losing something essential. Is that why you ended things with the doctor? Blessing's hand stilled on her cup. How did you know about that? Mrs. Kim heard you on the phone. She mentioned it. He looked almost apologetic. I'm sorry. That's probably my fault. It's not your fault. Or maybe it is. I don't know anymore. She set down her cup, forcing herself to be honest. Marcus wanted me to move in with him. He wanted to build a future together. And I realized I couldn't do it because I wasn't in love with him. I cared about him, but I didn't feel what I should have felt. What should you have felt? Something more than contentment. Something that made the risk worth it. And what about now? Junhyuk's voice was careful, controlled. How do you feel now? Blessing stood, gathering their dishes to avoid answering. But Junhyuk's hand, his good hand, caught her wrist, stopping her movement just as he had weeks ago in his bedroom. Don't run away from this question. I'm not running. I'm doing my job. Blessing. The way he said her name made her stop, made her turn back to face him. I nearly died last week. I got behind the wheel of a car while drunk and drove at dangerous speeds because I couldn't stand being in my own head anymore. And do you know what I thought about in that moment before impact? You. Not my company, not my legacy, not any of the things I thought mattered. Just you. And whether I'd ever have the chance to tell you that you deserve someone who feels that consuming, terrifying, impossible feeling you just described. Junhyuk. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to feel anything back. I'm not asking for that. But I need you to know that what I feel isn't just obsession or infatuation or wanting what I can't have. It's love. Maybe it started as obsession, maybe it's not the healthy kind of love that poets write about. But it's real, and it's the only thing I've felt in years that makes me want to be better than I am. Blessing's heart was racing, her professional composure completely destroyed. She should pull away, should maintain distance, should remember all the reasons this was impossible. But standing there in the morning light, seeing the absolute sincerity in his bruised face, she couldn't pretend anymore that she didn't feel something back. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Of what? Of this. Of feeling something for someone I work for. Of the power imbalance and the complications and everything that could go wrong. Of losing my independence. Of choosing wrong again. She took a shaky breath. Of feeling something this intense and not knowing how to control it. Junhyuk stood slowly, careful of his injuries, until he was close enough that she could feel his warmth. I'm scared too. I've never felt anything like this before. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be with someone without trying to control everything. But I want to learn. I want to learn how to love you in the way you deserve, even if it takes years. You don't even know what I deserve. Then teach me. Let me spend whatever time you'll give me learning who you really are beneath all these walls you've built. Blessing looked up at him, this complicated, broken, sincere man who'd somehow become essential to her even as she'd been pushing him away. She thought about contentment versus happiness, about safety versus risk, about all the practical reasons this was a terrible idea. And then she stopped thinking and let herself feel. Okay, she whispered. Okay. But we do this slowly. We figure it out as we go. And if it becomes too complicated, if the power dynamics become unhealthy, if I feel like I'm losing myself, we stop. Immediately. Do you understand? I understand. His good hand cupped her face with surprising gentleness. Thank you for giving me this chance. Don't thank me yet. You might regret it when you realize how stubborn I am. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. I've known how stubborn you are since the first day you refused to have dinner with me. It's one of the things I love most about you. The word love should have scared her more than it did. But instead, it settled into her chest like something that had been missing and was now finally found. The weeks that followed were strange and tentative and surprisingly sweet. They established new routines, breakfast together, long conversations on the terrace, Blessing reading aloud from his neglected library while he rested. Junhyuk's injuries forced patience on both of them, creating space for emotional intimacy before physical desire could complicate things. Blessing learned about his childhood, about parents who'd been cold and exacting, about the pressure of inheriting a company at 25 when his father died, about years of building walls because emotional distance felt safer than vulnerability. Junhyuk learned about her dreams deferred, about leaving Nigeria with equal parts excitement and guilt, about the loneliness of being a Black woman in East Asia, simultaneously hypervisible and invisible. People see my skin before they see me, she told him one evening, both of them sitting on the terrace watching the sunset. They make assumptions about where I'm from, what I do, why I'm here. Some people fetishize, some people fear, some people just can't see past the surface to the actual person underneath. I see you, Junhyuk said quietly. I've always seen you. That's what terrified me. Why did it terrify you? Because I'd spent so long being unseen myself, hiding behind my role, my wealth, my carefully constructed image. And then you looked at me and I felt naked. Exposed. Like you could see every inadequate, lonely, desperate part of me that I'd been hiding for years. Blessing reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. This had become natural between them, this casual physical affection that carried weight without pressure. I did see those parts, she admitted. But I also saw the parts you didn't know you had. The kindness underneath the control. The vulnerability underneath the pride. The capacity for real feeling underneath all that careful distance. Mrs. Kim watched their growing closeness with undisguised satisfaction, making knowing comments in Korean that Blessing only partially understood but whose meaning was clear. Even Junhyuk's office manager seemed relieved, mentioning how much more focused and present Junhyuk had been in recent video conferences. It was 6 weeks after the accident when things shifted again. Junhyuk's injuries had healed enough that he no longer needed constant monitoring, and Blessing had been preparing to move back to her apartment, to restore some normal distance between them. Don't go, Junhyuk said as she packed her things from the guest room. You're recovered. You don't need me here anymore. I do need you here. Just for different reasons now. He moved closer, his arm fully healed, his bruises faded to yellow-green shadows. Stay. Not as my employee. As yourself. As the woman I'm falling more in love with every day. Junhyuk, we need to be practical. If I stay here as more than your employee, people will talk. Your business associates, your staff. Let them talk. I don't care. But I do. She set down the clothes she'd been folding, turning to face him fully. I need to maintain my dignity. I need people to see me as something other than the help who seduced her employer. Then quit. I'll terminate your contract, pay you a year's salary as severance. You can stay here as my guest, my partner, whatever you want to call it. No power imbalance, no professional complications. And I'm supposed to just live off your charity? It's not charity. It's me trying to build something real with you. Isn't that what we've been doing these past weeks? Blessing felt the familiar panic rising, the fear of losing her independence. I can't just become dependent on you. That's not who I am. I'm not asking you to be dependent. I'm asking you to be with me. As an equal. As a partner. He took her hands, his grip warm and steady. Blessing, I love you. Not as my employee, not as some fantasy. As the complicated, stubborn, brilliant woman who makes me want to be better than I am. And I hope that you might love me too. Just a little. She wanted to deny it, to protect herself with the same walls she'd been building since she first arrived in Seoul. But standing there, Looking into his eyes and seeing nothing but sincerity and hope and vulnerability, she couldn't lie. More than a little, she admitted. Enough that it scares me. Good. I want it to scare you. I want you to feel as terrified and exposed and completely undone as I've felt for months. Because that's how I know it's real. This is insane. Completely. We're going to have to figure out so many things. What I do for work, how we present this to people, how to navigate the cultural expectations. We'll figure it out together. One day at a time. Blessing searched his face, looking for any sign of the obsessive intensity that had frightened her months ago. But what she found instead was something softer, more mature. Love that had been tested by time and circumstance and had emerged as something stronger than simple desire. Okay, she said again, the word carrying different weight than it had the first time. Okay, I'll stay. Not as your employee. As your partner. But we need to do this right. I need to find my own work, my own purpose. I need to maintain my independence even while building something with you. Can you accept that? I can accept anything as long as it means you stay. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like the tentative touches they'd shared before. It was deep and desperate, and full of weeks of restraint finally releasing. Blessing felt herself melting into him, all her careful control dissolving as she let herself feel the full force of what she'd been denying. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Junhyuk rested his forehead against hers. I never knew you were so sweet, he murmured. Blessing laughed, the sound surprising them both. Sweet? I've been nothing but difficult since we met. Exactly. Sweet in the way you pushed back, in the way you refused to let me use power to get what I wanted. Sweet in the way you took care of me even when you had every reason not to. Sweet in the way you make me want to deserve you. He pulled back slightly, studying her face with that intensity she'd grown to recognize and cherish. I spent my whole life thinking sweetness was weakness. But you showed me it's the opposite. It takes real strength to be gentle in a world that rewards hardness. You're getting philosophical. Love makes me philosophical. You make me philosophical. His smile was teasing, playful in a way she'd never seen from him before. You make me a lot of things I never thought I could be. That night, everything changed between them in ways that words couldn't fully capture. What had been building for months, all that tension and restraint and careful emotional negotiation, finally found its natural expression. And when Blessing woke the next morning in Junhyuk's arms, sunlight streaming through windows she used to clean, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Home. Not the country she'd left, not the apartment she'd been renting, but this feeling of being known and wanted and chosen. Of choosing in return. The practical complications didn't disappear. Blessing spent weeks navigating the social complexities of being romantically involved with her former employer, fielding questions from friends and dealing with judgment from people who didn't understand or didn't approve. She found work as a consultant for international businesses trying to establish presence in West Africa, using her language skills and cultural knowledge to build something that was hers. Junhyuk worked on being less controlling, on asking instead of assuming, on building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than one person's desire to possess the other. It wasn't always smooth. They argued about money, about cultural expectations, about the ways their different backgrounds shaped their assumptions about relationships. But they kept choosing each other. Through disagreements and misunderstandings, through family complications when Blessing finally took Junhyuk to Lagos to meet her mother, through the slow process of learning to be truly known by another person. A year later, Junhyuk proposed on the same terrace where they'd first begun their tentative conversations, the Seoul skyline glittering behind them. I'm not asking you to complete me, he said, holding out a ring that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. I'm not asking you to fix me or save me or be anything other than exactly who you are. I'm asking if you want to build a life together. As equal partners. As two people who chose to love each other despite all the reasons it seemed impossible. Blessing looked at the ring, then at his face, seeing the vulnerability and hope and absolute certainty in his eyes. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, so focused on protection and independence that she'd nearly missed the chance for something real. Yes, she said, slipping the ring onto her finger. But I have conditions. Junhyuk laughed, that free sound that she loved drawing out of him. Of course you do. I keep my business. I keep my independence. We make major decisions together, not unilaterally. And if you ever try to buy your way out of an argument, I'm keeping the ring and leaving you. Deal. Any other conditions? Just one. She moved into his arms, feeling his warmth and solidity and the steady beat of his heart. Love me as I am. Not as who you think I should be, not as who's convenient. Just me. That's the easiest condition you've given me, he murmured against her hair. I wouldn't know how to love you any other way. Their wedding was small and intimate, a blend of Korean and Nigerian traditions that reflected both their backgrounds. Blessing wore a dress that managed to honor both cultures, and Junhyuk's vows were in both English and Korean, promising partnership over possession, growth over control. Standing there, surrounded by the few people who truly mattered, Blessing thought about how far they'd both come. From employer and employee, from obsession and resistance, from walls built so high they'd seemed unscalable. To this, two people who'd learned that real love required vulnerability, patience, and the courage to be seen. I never expected this, she told him during their first dance, both of them slightly awkward but committed to the moment. Expected what? To feel this happy, this complete, this certain that I made the right choice. You almost didn't choose me at all. I almost didn't choose myself. But I did. And in choosing myself, I found space for us. Junhyuk pulled her closer, and they swayed together in silence for a moment before he spoke again. Thank you. For what? For being stubborn. For refusing to accept less than you deserved. For teaching me that love isn't about power or possession or getting what you want. It's about becoming someone worthy of being loved by an extraordinary person. Blessing smiled against his shoulder, feeling the truth of his words settle into her bones. This was what love looked like when it was real, not the dramatic gestures or grand speeches, but the daily choice to see each other clearly and choose each other anyway. You know what's funny, she said. What? When I first started working at your house, I thought you were impossible. Cold and distant and so wrapped up in your own world that you couldn't see anyone else. I was all those things. But you were also lonely and scared and desperate for connection. Just like me. We were both so busy protecting ourselves that we almost missed each other entirely. But we didn't miss each other. Against all odds, despite every complication, we found our way here. We did. Blessing looked up at him, seeing the future written in his eyes, not perfect, not without challenges, but real and chosen and absolutely worth the risk. I love you, Kang Junhyuk. My impossible, complicated, sweet man who drove me crazy until I couldn't imagine my life without you. I love you, Blessing Emeka. My stubborn, brilliant, beautiful woman who refused to let me take the easy way and insisted I become someone better. They kissed as their families and friends applauded, and Blessing felt something that had been wound tight inside her for years finally, fully relax. She'd found what she'd been looking for without knowing she was looking for it, not just love, but a partner who saw her completely and loved her anyway. Who challenged her to grow while accepting who she already was. The reception continued around them, music and laughter and the joyful chaos of two families learning to blend. But in that moment, Blessing was aware only of Junhyuk's hand in hers, the weight of the ring on her finger, and the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Later, as they prepared to leave for their honeymoon, Mrs. Kim pulled Blessing aside with tears in her eyes. I told you, the older woman said in her heavily accented English. I told you that you help him. You did, Blessing agreed, embracing her. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't see myself. You were always seeing. Just scared to admit. It was true. Blessing had been scared of feeling too much, of wanting too much, of risking the independence she'd fought so hard to build. But in the end, she'd learned that real independence wasn't about staying isolated. It was about choosing connection from a place of strength rather than need. As they drove away from the reception, Junhyuk laced his fingers through hers, and Blessing looked out at Seoul passing by, the city that had challenged her, changed her, and ultimately given her more than she'd ever expected to find. What are you thinking? Junhyuk asked. That I'm grateful. For what? For you being persistent when I was resistant. For me being stubborn when you were obsessive. For both of us being brave enough to be vulnerable. She squeezed his hand. For this second chance at happiness that I didn't even know I needed. We gave each other that chance. That's what makes it worth it. Blessing leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the rightness of this moment, this choice, this life they'd built together from impossible beginnings. Love hadn't been what she expected, not simple or easy or without complications. But it was real, and it was theirs, and it had been worth every risk, every fear, every moment of uncertainty. I never knew you were so sweet, she murmured, echoing his words from months ago. Junhyuk laughed, the sound warm and free. I learned from the best. And as they drove into their future together, uncertain, imperfect, but absolutely theirs, Blessing knew that she'd finally found what she'd been searching for all along. Not contentment. Not safety. But the terrifying, exhilarating, absolutely worthwhile risk of being truly, completely loved.